Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Snowpiercer. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. But first and foremost, I thought it was really interesting how both Alex and Wilfred are the ones who end up seeing Melanie. Obviously, she represents very different things for both of them, because, I mean, obviously for Alex, it's just like, obviously... And I thought it was a really interesting line where she had actually talked about the fact is she never, like, when it came to people she lost, she never got to see anybody's body. So, like, she's seen death before, but it's never been... I mean, in the grand scheme of things, I don't know if she's actually ever seen death. Like, she might not even been just referencing, like, people that matter to her. She might just be talking about, in general, she's never actually seen anyone, like, die. She's never actually seen a body. So she's like, I never saw it with Grandma, Grandpa... Shiloh, nor you, Mom. And I thought that was such a powerful line of, like, right. And I guess, like, seeing it makes it, like, it's something, and she needs to, because it is this interesting line where, like, Melanie inside of her head is like, right, reality isn't any better than our imaginations. Like, sometimes you want to think, like, all right, the not knowing and all this inside your head is just going to make it worse. But it's like, no, reality will sucker punch you with the truth, too. It doesn't make it any better. You know, so I thought that was kind of an interesting thing, because Alex had to confront the past this episode, because as they're on their way, there's trains blocking their passageway, and if they went around, it basically take 23 days, and Asha's already struggling with, like, keeping up with all these lies, because I thought you were going to make sure, like, not to keep her as far away from people, but it's like, no, in retrospect, it's like, that would be the worst thing to do. You need her out front and center answering all these questions, because people would get even more suspicious if you try to hide her away. So you're concocting all these lies, like, all Wilfred, oh, no, not said Wilfred. All Andre had to do was tell her what he saw, what he believed, and, you know, what he saw in his vision, what he read up about. So all he had to do was tell her to recite all that and make it seem like it was just coming from her first-hand experience. So, but he knows just to kind of keep it in small enough doses, answer some questions that people would ask, but also just keep her away from people enough to... no one sees the cracks in her story, essentially. So, like, they don't have time to wait. Like, so they have to do this. But the thing is, Alex wanted to go aboard the trains alone, because apparently, like, in the first year, Wilfred dropped these trains from Big Alice, you know, just to kind of shed some weight. But she left off the fact is that there were people on board. Because the moment she mentioned it, I was like, right, they did mention before last season that Wilfred had a calling. Killed people just so everyone else could survive. So we see this was the calling. And because Alex was young at the time, she was only like about 10 years old at the time, and she didn't tell Ben, because Ben's already like, all right, I've got two engineers that really aren't at their best right now. We've got Javi running Snowpiercer right now, but he's not in the best condition right now, because he's still, like, traumatized and got PTSD from the dog attack. Like, the entire episode, like, all he can do is hear the barking. Like, that's always going to be... I mean, considering what he went through, like, how messed up he is, like, it's not just the physical damage, but the psychological damage that was done to him. It's not just going to be easy to shake that off. So he's got to deal with that, and he's got to deal with Alex. But he ends up giving Alex the time she needs, because she needs to see this through. It's important to her, because basically we kind of find out more about Wilfred. It's like, oh, everything he did, he basically put people through a test, how strong they are. Like, he even used book club to determine the original thinkers. It's like, right. And she's like, oh, like, it felt like you were chosen. And even Alex was like, I was chosen. And I think there's probably, like, I don't know, they didn't really get into it, but I'm sure, like, as his kid, you feel even more guilt, because, like, you were chosen. Like, yes, I'm good at what I do, but it's also because he figured I'd carry on both him and my mom's genes. Like, they're both extremely smart. They know their know-how about engineering and stuff, so they knew I would have an aptitude for it. Probably already did. Maybe he did test her, but only for the purposes of reconfirming what he was already feeling. But it is still a thing of, you were kind of chosen and other people weren't. So, like, it is going to be survivor's guilt. So... and I think, truth be told, a lot of people in this show have that survivor's guilt. Even Asha, which we'll get to later. But that's what I think is so fascinating, that she had to kind of confront this past. And even, you know, seeing Shiloh's body, and even bringing a CD which said, like, I had to pause. I was like, oh, what does it say? It's before. She's like, and she even explains, like, it isn't music we listen to, it was sounds. sounds of before, like trying to remember what life was like before the train. So one of the people she first connected with, probably like, who knows, like, was that like, was it a friendship from before the train? Was it a friendship they made on the train? Either way, like, that is kind of such a thing to happen, because Alex wasn't expecting this, though, because she didn't remember, because it was so many years ago, she didn't remember where Wilford dropped the train, because it was in the middle of the night. Everyone was asleep. It's like, yeah, that's the perfect time to kill a whole bunch of people without really much resistance. Like, kill them while they're asleep. That way no one sees it coming. So that's why she probably didn't know where the trains had been dropped off either. The train cars had been dropped off either, because she was probably asleep at the time. So I mean, let's not forget, like, it's not the same thing, but Snowpiercer had to leave a whole bunch of people to freeze to death, too. Granted, those people were awake and it wasn't in their sleep, so that's kind of like the rub of it all. Like, there is the similarities yet. But it all culminates with Alex having to come to terms with her complicated feelings about it. Because, like, obviously, well, not just about it, but, like, Wilford in general, how she loathes him. It's like, right, he's basically responsible for killing your mother. After you finally got reunited after so long, he did that just for the purposes of, oh, I'm doing this because I don't want to take the chance she might, like, take away my throne, my godlyhood of, like, how people see and view me. There's that element to it, but there's also general, like, yeah, you killed my mom. Let's just leave it at that. It's enough of a reason, but it's, despite all that, she still misses him and loves him. And even, and Melanie inside her head is like, it's okay to do that. Because it's so interesting, because the opening lines were really interesting from her, where she was basically saying that Wilford says, like, people who are basically drowning, and people who drown in their past are weak, basically being held hostage by the past are weak, but those who basically use their past as fuel to, like, pave the way forward, like, to give them the push they need going forward, now those are the strong. So, but because for Alex, it's like she wants to figure this out, because by figuring this out, it's her coming to terms with the past on a personal level, but on a larger level, because it's like, right, she needs to overcome this, not only for Snowpiercer's sake of, like, right, we can't slow down for too long, we need to get to where we're getting, because if we don't, this lie will implode. There's that element, but it's also, right, I need to confront this, I need to be able to do this, because she thinks without Wilford she won't be able to, but coming to terms of, like, right, it's okay to even love him. So she remembers, like, she's like, without him, I won't be able to see, like, the train. Like, I can never see it without him. And she thinks back to a memory when he taught her how to see everything. The arteries, essentially, the bloodline of the train. And she's, in that moment, was able to immediately figure out what was wrong with the train. They were able to kind of get the train cars, like, locks pulled up. So it all worked out in the end, because Alex was able to figure things out, so. But despite, things being the way they are there, which really quickly I should also know, I love that line at the very beginning when Ben shows up and, like, Melanie's like, man, I miss him. And you almost have Alex being like, ew, gross, no, ugh. Which is kind of messed up that, like, your subconscious would, I mean, I guess it's supposed to make it even more so, like, that is Melanie. But like I said, I think it's interesting on the flip side that Wilford has the same thing. Obviously, like, his moments with Melanie aren't as close or sincere. It is the interesting thing that he's saying that, oh, I know where we are. Wait, if the train's moving this way, that means it's Hobby driving, and he knows more better than anyone, it's a two-engineer job to move the train, so it has to be Ben and Alex. And it's like, oh, it's like, oh, Shiloh, it's like, oh, no one should have to see those horrors or whatever. I'm like, it's easy. What are you saying? Like, you're almost acting like it wasn't you who did the horrible thing in the first place. He's just, yeah. But once again, it was never those compassionate moments between, because I guess even in his mind, he knows Melanie would never give that to him. Alex gets that. I think that's done so interestingly enough, just how, like, Melanie's represented by both of them. Because in his head, it's just like, Melanie's like, yep, that, it's like, right, oh, that other person I like to listen to. And she was like, oh, yourself? And he was like, yes. But it's just like, she's just meant to be the person he bounces stuff off of. That's all she mainly was. And then, like, Alex, it's like, no, like, she's meant to be like a guiding hand, filling a role of a mother. I brought her up a little bit earlier. It's the whole Asha situation about her struggling with everything. Obviously, it's a bit of an adjustment period being around people again, and especially because she's kind of the center of attention. She's hoping to be that center of, like, she understands her role of, like, right, I am, like, the center of attention. Like, I am kind of, like, the hope in these people. Even at the point later on when she's kind of breaking down a little bit, she's like, no, like, I get it. I understand what role I play in this. I understand, like, I'll keep this light going. I don't want to destroy it, because she's like, I see the hope in these people's eyes, and I don't want to take that away. Which Bess was like, and if that's the case, then that makes you one of us. Like, even more so, like, having to be keeping up this lie and the struggles with it. Like, yeah, they've been in that boat too many times before. As Ruth said, like, last episode, the train demands a lie. But I think there's stuff that Asha hasn't really dealt with, hasn't really talked about, like what she had to go through to survive. And whatever it was, it seems like she killed somebody, and it haunts her. And she's like, I mean, there's probably multiple people they potentially get. Like, she talked about it a little bit, about some of the circumstances, but she hasn't really gone into the ins and outs of what she went through. And she's saying, like, I'm not worth saving, which Bess is like, we've all done things we're not proud of to survive, So it isn't just a you thing. But it is interesting that the one room she would end up going into, that's probably the worst room to go into, is a room where basically Audrey would take people to kind of deal with stuff. So that's kind of interesting that would be the room that she'd go to. I'm wondering, will that serve any purpose for Asha? Like, will they get... I don't know. It's also, you can't trust Audrey considering who she is right now. She's not the same Audrey who used to help people out before. She is Wilford's Audrey right now, so I don't see that ending so positively. But I just, for her to end up in that room is just interesting, so I'm curious, is that going to foreshadow some stuff of her kind of confronting her own past because of that room, or what? Some other interesting discoveries, we found out about some of the deaths that took place in between seasons. Both the Australians are gone because of like a flu that struck while they were gone, based on Pike. And the lady who was kind of like a mother figure in the tale, I think that's who he was referencing, she's gone as well. So a lot happened while he was gone. And obviously Pike has a lot of resentment towards Leighton. He's never been the biggest fan of Leighton's like leadership. He's had an issue with it since season 1, but even more so when it's like, cool, you kind of abandoned us. And because Leighton's kind of dishing out jobs, giving people an opportunity, he's even asking Pike, it's like, right, you stepped up leadership-wise, so it's like, right, they're going to need a person like you, so when the time comes, like, what position do you want? But it's like, he's like, yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, but it's still you asking me. But because in his mind, Ruth should be the one, because it's like, oh, like, why don't, she was even asking later on, like, why don't you want... why do you fear potential? And he's like, because I was already the best version of myself when I was the right hand to your rebellion. So he's like, you should be leading this train. And she's like, don't say that, So for Pike, as long as it's Leighton, he's never going to, because it's also like, Leighton had him do stuff he's not proud of, like the Terrence thing. Like, that was always a big rub of, like, right, I had to do the dirty work. For him, it's like, in his mind, it's like, that's all I'll ever be. My hands will always be stained with that. Like, I've had to do some stuff I'm not very proud of. And that's just how it is. I don't think he views himself as a leader. He always feels like, I am going to be someone's right hand. I'd rather be under Ruth's, because I trust Ruth, because she would never ask me to do something like that. Whereas Leighton has, so... Like I said, it's just, there's a lot of bad blood there anyway. Good and bad blood, like, they mended a lot of fences, sure, but it's still, like, obviously Pike has a lot of reasons to resent Andre, so. But other than that, we found, well, going back to it, though, I should focus on that. Like, I did like the whole Ruth and Pike thing of them progressing. That was actually really cute. That moment they share, like the banana and the ice cream and everything. It was super cute. She'd asked him about his past, but he's like, "Yeah, I'm not." Why? Kind of almost like it doesn't matter. He's just like, "Yeah, I just want to be Pike." It's kind of all he wants to be. Yeah, I don't think we've ever have learned about who he was before the train and stuff like that. And I guess it's that thing of kind of doesn't matter after everything that we've been through, everything that I've done. Who I was before doesn't matter, because this is who I am now, and this is who I plan to be. So, I wonder will we kind of dive into Pikes Past at all this season because of those lines. We'll have to wait and see. Some other interesting developments. We found out that Wilfred had Andre and Zara's baby experimented on. Basically, the same gene stuff that they were doing to make Josie the way she is, did the same thing to Zara's baby, which Andre was flipping out. He's like, why would you do that? Like, and for her, it's like, yeah, I was giving our baby the best chance to survive. But for him, it's like, yeah, but no matter what, our baby will always be tied to Wilfred. And she's like, I get it, but you were gone. You're not, even while you're here, you're not really here, because it's like, because like me and the baby, like, yeah, you care about us, but it's more so like your mind is in a million other places leading this train. It's like, right, like that the train kind of comes first before us. I could also see Andre's perspective, because it's like, again and again, you keep doing stuff to, it's like, don't pretend this was for my sake, don't pretend it was for our baby's sake. You did this to secure your own self-preservation, just like you've done in the past, which also plays into, that means on some level Andre still hasn't forgiven her for that, on some level. If he's still willing to throw that in her face, because he's still going to be like, because in his mind this is a pattern. It's like you have this ingrained in you to some extent. So like for him, the fact is he's throwing it back in her face means he hasn't completely let it go. I think if you're willing to throw that into an argument, it's still somewhere in your heart and your mind. You still can't quite forgive her for that. And basically, she has gives Andre an ultimatum. Either you can accept things as they are, or you could basically like just kind of bail out, but it's like, yeah, like you need to let go a lot of your anger. It's like, yeah, obviously some of that anger is towards Zara, but it's also towards himself, just because, well, not towards himself, but like towards, well, probably a little towards himself, just because like I wasn't here to stop that, and also just that grubby bastard Wilfred having his way and stuff like that. So even in a position where you're in a medical complicated situation, Wilfred still couldn't help himself from being a smug bastard he is. He's talking about like, oh, our baby. It's like you're in this situation when Andre's saying like, if I could, I'd pull up a chair and watch you die, but I need you. But because Wilfred, like they all say, like it's basically the gift that keeps on giving, because they needed his help. But granted, life is funny and interesting how it all works out. But we'll turn to that in a second, but it does seem like Andre kind of let a lot of that go, and he's visiting Zara later on, so I think he is willing to let that go, being like, right, you did what you needed to survive, so I can't blame you for that. You're trying to give our baby the best chance. But also because it's like, well, we're not going to be, well, because he also confessed to Zara, because that's also the thing too, for him to find out, because the doctor's the one that's like, yeah, I was kind of taken off looking after Zara and your baby for a while. She's like, it's like, you didn't tell me. Like, I think that's what stings even more. It's like, it's a secret you and Wilfred kept. Like, you kept this from me. At no point did you decide to tell me. I had to find out on my own. Someone else had to tell me. So I think that's also what rubbed him the wrong way about it too. Like, especially because he's confiding in her about like, yeah, what if I'm wrong about this place? But then Zara was like, yeah, but what if you're right? But that's the thing too. You were banking on like, well, what if you're wrong? Because you got these. I think maybe that's what plays into it a little bit too. Like, right, you got this experiment done because you're like, oh, you want to give our baby the best shot. But it's like, we're planning on getting off this train. But it's like, yeah, but what if things don't work out? Like, she got contingencies is kind of what it seems like. So especially because like, right, this stuff is still experimental. We don't know what kind of effect that's going to have on the baby, because I don't think it's been done on adults, but it hasn't been done on an unborn child. So we don't know what that means, in the long run. So that's also the thing too. Like, yeah, let's not forget about the element of you just let someone experiment on our unborn child. So, but also we in this episode we also have the Roach situation of him kind of trying to readjust. Obviously, he's finding himself at the bottom of a bottle, to the point his daughter Carly's like, I'm done, and kind of leave. Like, I'm guessing she's staying with someone else for a while. But it's like, right, it's not just you that went through this. You're not the only one that lost mom. I did too. But you're so busy drowning in your own sorrow. Like, you're the only one that's hurting. I'm hurting too. And she just kind of leaves. And Bess is like, right, just give yourself that dad time. It's like, yeah, you worry about him then. Like, I'm not going to worry about it. It's like a thing of like, because in her mind, it's like, if he doesn't care about me, then why should I care about him? you know, because she is the child in this situation, and he's supposed to kind of be there for her. You know, and obviously, like, he talks about it to Bess, like, everyone thinks going in the drawer, like, oh, like, Anne died in her sleep. Is like, no, you don't sleep while you're under there. It's like a half awake, like, you're kind of aware of your circumstance. It's not like you're fully, like, in REM sleep. It's like, that's not sleep. It's something else, and it's just, it makes it all worse. It's not like, oh, not like she was asleep. It's like, no, she was kind of conscious to some extent, like, and died. Like, that's the heartbreaking thing about it. So when he wants to go see the drawers, my immediate thought was like, oh my God, is he going to go in there and get into the drawer that she died in? Like, is that going to be an issue? Then he got, like, the stuff they used to put you to sleep. I was like, is he going to start trying to get high off that? Is he going to try and kill himself? But then the moment he dressed up in his breaker uniform and took it, I was like, what is it? Oh, I was like, the moment he showed up where Wilfred, I was like, you're going to try and kill the bastard. You want him to feel what you felt. So stabbed him right in the heart. So it's going to be interesting to see where that kind of goes. Because no one's going to blame him necessarily for doing what he did, but also, like, I'm curious, is anyone going to be like, well, Wilfred was already locked up. Like, are you going to do anything about that punishment-wise? The man was grieving considering his circumstance. I'm just curious to see what the aftermath of that is going to be, because that's not going to alleviate any of the pain that Roach is in. And I'm sure for Bess, it's the thing of, like, yeah, she's still balancing out, you know, her own stuff while also trying to help out Sam, you know, so we'll see how that plays out. But currently where things are, Wilfred is going to be out of commission, so it's not like they're going to be able to rely on him. I'm sure they're happy about that. It's like, you know, and I even love that moment of Alex being like, wow, like, when you actually see him in this position, like, from a different perspective, he's not that powerful. It's like, when you see him, it's like, because you never get to see, because he's always seemed so strong and so fearless and fearful. Making people fearful is rather what I'm trying to say. And to see him kind of in a weaker state, it's just kind of like, oh, like, he's not that scary. He's not that strong when you look at him from a certain perspective. So she's staying by his side, I think, you know, because it's like, yeah, I do miss and love you, but it's also like there's a part of enjoyment of knowing, like, right, here you are so weak and fragile, so alone, and just so weak. So very, very interesting circumstances. I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.